Yo, what it do, everybody? Your favorite anti-hero is back with another video. For those that don't know me, I am the Pepperoni, and here I don't typically like to throw shade, but I do enjoy sprinkling pepper. Because I care. In today's video, we're going to be doing a book roast, and it's going to be for the novel The Stranger by the author Sylvia Mazara. As a disclosure, this video will have lots of spoilers for this book. Lots of spoilers for this book. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start with the cover. The cover image is, well, it's just bland. It's very like a stock image kind of look. It does not catch the attention of somebody. If this was sitting on a bookshelf, people, it's just not going to catch the eye of people. Your book cover isn't everything, but the fact of the matter is, it does draw in potential readers. And so you do want your book cover to be interesting and eye catching. And there's almost nothing on the cover. I mean, when you technically look at this image, over half of the image is black. I mean, there's stars, obviously, there's tiny little white specks that are, stars, but the bulk of your cover is just nothing. There's actually more going on the back of your cover with this large green, cloud. Speaking of the back of the book, the back cover, the blurb here, it's very misleading. This little paragraph is the dry overview of your book. That's fine. This little paragraph is the more poetic overview of the story. That's fine. And this last little bit here, that's just a dedication for the story. That's fine too. The problem is this big in-depth one in the middle, which paints the very clear picture that the main character of this story is the alien Rise. The main character of this story is not Rise. Rise is on a mission on Earth in order to determine Earth's destiny, but his judgment is in danger of becoming clouded when he meets and falls in love with Carla, a human. Just kind of glosses over this Carla human. She's not important. The balance of life on Earth depends upon Rise's recommendation to the League of Galaxies. But how will Rise choose between his mission and his love for an Earthling? Rise is forced to weigh up the collective evil on Earth and its casual effect on the greater good of other life in the universe against the love he has for one woman. So clearly, this book is supposed to be about Rise. However, if you picked up on all the shade I was throwing in the book review, this book is not about Rise. The inside of this book is about Carla. And so this leads me to the title of the book. Now, the title is just as generic and bland as the cover. It's actually hard to find this book online because the cover or the title is so unoriginal. There's lots of other books with The Stranger. You have to type in specifically the author's name to try and narrow it down. I would not have called it The Stranger. I think it would have been better to be called The Stranger Who Drinks Coffee. So somehow, two novels that I've read, reviewed, and roasted back to back, both of them are obsessed with the word coffee. And yet, ironically, they're both also obsessed with Mother Earth and I guess fighting climate change. I don't know if that's part of the cult. You got to be obsessed with coffee. I don't know what's the correlation there. But wow, I thought the last author was the coffee champion. Oh, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Here's a neat fact for you. Um, this story, uh, it has 229 pages. Okay, and that's including the about the author page right here. So 229. However, if you flip to the front of the book, um, the number count starts on page 5 at the prologue. So that means 1 through 4, we're not going to count that. So really it's just 225 pages. Okay, very modest. If you take the number 225 and you divide it by 3, you get 75. I say this because the word coffee appears on 75 pages in this book. You understand what I'm saying? That means if I randomly flip to any page in this book, there's a 1 in 3 chance that I'm going to find the word coffee. If this book was actually about a guy who worked in a coffee shop, I might expect that. Not in a sci-fi apocalyptic romance. But it gets worse because that's just it appearing at least once on a page. You want to guess how many times the word coffee appears in this book? The C category? 147 times the word coffee appears in this book. And this over here, the smaller one, the S, that's a tally of 52. That is the root word of sigh. S-I-G-H. Sigh. Lots and lots of sighing in this book. Now, getting into the book, this book has both a prologue and an epilogue, and I didn't like either. The prologue was an interesting start. It catches your attention right off the bat, and it's got some drama going on. It seems like this person that we are just in the process of meeting, this Carla person, whoever that is, we don't know, and it appears she's in danger. So that's interesting, right? Here's the problem. The prologue is not chronological. It doesn't take place before the story. In fact, the prologue is a flash forward into the future. But it gets worse because it's not just a flash forward to a point that actually happens. It's actually a flash forward point in time where there is a false prophecy. So what you're seeing in the prologue is a dream that the character Carla has later in the story that she thinks is a prophecy that's going to happen, and then it doesn't. Then at the end of the book, you have this epilogue. And the epilogue is essentially just a big old info dump of all these details that apparently the author couldn't figure out how to put into the story, which is a real travesty because parts of this epilogue are more interesting than the whole book. The epilogue talks about like big intergalactic conspiracies of this alien race trying to take over the League of Galaxies and stuff, and it's just like, whoa, man, that's a fucking story. And you just wedge it in all dry in the epilogue? But in the epilogue is actually the most what the fuck moment in this book. Let me show you. On page 227, there's this little gem. It says, Commander left when he was convinced Carla and Tom were back to normal health. He'd taken a shine to the dog for his heroic efforts in trying to save his mistress and promised to babysit him if Rise and Carla ever wanted to get away from time to time. What the fuck is that? That is the most idiotic thing that I've probably ever read on this channel. Okay, so Commander, who is the lead. Commander is an alien. He's an extraterrestrial. He's not just from another planet. He's from another galaxy. The book specifically says approximately 8 billion light years away. And he is the head leader of an intergalactic union called the League of Galaxies. And you're telling me that this man, this alien, is going to travel 8 billion light years across space through a wormhole and abandon his duties as the leader of a multi-galaxy union to babysit your fucking dog. like imagine the head of the UN, the head of the United Nations, telling you, the viewer, whoever's watching this, that they are willing to board a plane and fly to your country and put all of their United Nations stuff on hold. Couldn't make the meeting, sorry. Put all that on hold, fly to your country, and dog sit for you. The leader of the UN. Does that not sound absolutely ridiculous? And that's just here on this planet, the UN. You're telling me this League of Galaxies head would do that? Really? Really? Now, a good while ago, before I even began to read this book, right when I bought it, I contacted the author. And I told her, hey, I bought the book. I'm going to read it. And she was like, that's great. And I was like, I'm also going to review it. And she was like, wonderful. And I was like, I'm also going to roast it. And she's like, well, critic's a critic. Everybody's got critics. And I was like, well, just so you know, because I do critique everything, every little detail. So I hope it's edited really good. And she was like, don't worry, I self-edit my books. So I got really anxious and worried. I was like, oh, she self-edits. This is going to be very bad in the best way possible. Okay, so it turns out she's actually pretty good. I'll give her that. This book is pretty solid when it comes to an edit. There's one or two little things throughout the book, like maybe a word was supposed to be plural, she forgot an S, or maybe it was supposed to be the word they and she put the word the. Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 of those little things, petty things, not even worth pointing out, right? So it's pretty good. And And there's not any real big problem with run-on sentences, uh, which I love reading run-on sentences. That's just so fun pointing that out. There's not really any of those, but there is one thing, and it's kind of like a run-on sentence. It's incomplete sentences. You see, it's like this author had run-on sentences, and then noticed that they were run-on sentences, and so she decided to just insert periods in the middle of her sentences and capitalize the immediately following word and just continue as if that was okay. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is on page 27. I'm just going to read you a sentence, and you decide for yourself if it makes sense, if you really grasp what this sentence is talking about. It says, such a discovery would shatter his hopes, more so than the problems they would face if Carla did end up falling for him after all. Do you really understand that sentence? It starts with such a discovery. What discovery? I don't know what that discovery is. I guess I have to go back to the previous sentence to try and figure it out. So let's go back to the previous sentence. The previous sentence says, to make matters even more complicated, he had chosen not to delve too much into her thoughts in case he found out that she did not like him as a potential partner. Well, that just creates more questions now, doesn't it? Because that sentence starts out with, to make matters worse. Okay, so let's go. I guess we gotta go back another sentence. Previous sentence starts, but with her state of mind after the breakup of her relationship, this could take forever. What could take forever? I'm still lost. What are we talking about here? So let's go back to the sentence before that. This meant he would have to do things the earthly way to win her trust. This meant, what meant? Every sentence is starting empty. What the hell am I talking about? And now I have to go back another sentence. How's the next sentence start? At the top of page 27, the sentence reads, therefore, comma, she would not recognize him as a twin soul. Therefore. Therefore what? Let's go back to the next sentence before that one. Starting on page 26. No matter how pure her energy, Carla was an earthling. There should be a comma there. And she did not have his gift. Finally, a sentence that makes sense. No matter how pure her energy, Carla was an earthling. And she did not have his gift. Okay? We don't have to know what the gift is. The sentence is complete. It makes sense. But every sentence after that, for like 4 or 5 sentences, are all continuations of the same point. This happens a lot in the book. There's way too many instances to point them out. Now, aside from the repetition of the word coffee and the word sigh, there is some minor detail repetition. One thing is the repeated mention of the character Rise's unique eyes. On page 30, it says, his purple-blue gaze unsettled her. So right there we learn that his gaze is purplish blue. Then on page 42, it says, on top of this, there were his eyes, more purple than blue. And then, much later in the book, on page 163, it pops up a third time. It says at the bottom, This reminded her of Rise and his fringe of hair falling over those purple blue eyes she could never get used to. I think like 2 times probably would have been better. Maybe mention it here on 163 and then mention it the first time on page 30. I think the middle one wasn't necessary. Or you could have at least mentioned it the 2 times early on, and then later in the story you could just say his unique eyes, um, or his beautiful exotic eyes. A much more annoying one was the mention of what is apparently a visual twin, a doppelganger effect between the character Carla and the character Rise's ex-wife, deceased wife. I pronounce her name Zai, spelled like this, Zai. So on page 15, it says, of course, Carla was not his wife come to life, but rather an identical twin. The following little bit continues on this. It says, the term used to describe this phenomenon was known as doppelgangers. Rise always believed these people were simply uncanny lookalikes rather than absolute identical twins. Then, on the very next page, 16, it says, he'd been too engrossed in thoughts of Carla and her identical looks to Zai. Then, on page 25, it says, in dialogue, it was simply the shock of finding someone who looks identical to Zai. On the next page, 26, you can argue it's in the same vein. It says, on a personal note, he also reminded himself that Carla was not Zai. Carla was a different person to his wife, but her energy reminded him very much of Zai. Kind, loving, vulnerable, and absolutely beautiful. Then on page 50, it says in dialogue, she's too much like Zai. And then on page 51, it says in dialogue, she's much more than Zai. She's truly a twin soul. Now that's a twin reference to him. So apparently, Rise and Carla have souls that look just alike. They have twin souls, but Carla and Zai have twin faces. Of course, on page 27, it says, therefore, she would not recognize him as a twin soul. On page 39, Zai had been his soulmate, but Carla was more than this. She was a true twin soul. On page 60, it says, Rise was a twin soul, her other half. On page 67, it says, and it wasn't because Carla could have been Zai's twin. This had been a strange coincidence, to be sure, but not the reason why Rise recognized Carla as a twin soul. So that was a twofer. That one talks about how she's Rise's twin, but also his ex-wife's twin. Then you have page 84 in the middle of dialogue. You know, she looked very much like you. He didn't want Carla to know Zai had been identical in looks. So yeah, they all three are triplets or something. On page 27, there's a bit of information doubling. Well, it's 27 and then on to 28. It says repeatedly, or sorry, let me just start at the beginning of the sentence. Where the fuck is the beginning of the sentence? After all, during the 6 months since the breakup, their communications had been full of anger, with Carla often telling him off for being such a bastard. It's a bit of a run on sentence, comma. And Michael trying to lie to her repeatedly by assuring her he was in debt, semicolon, but that he would pay back the money he'd borrowed. Okay, so you're telling me that in an info dump right here, but then right here in dialogue we see all that stuff again. Dialogue. This is from Michael. It says, Carla, I meant it when I said I only borrowed the money. Michael trying to appeal to her. Continuing. It's just that things are tough, and I lost so much on the shares we had. I wanted to let you know that I'll pay you back. Honest. So we just learned that like 2 paragraphs ago. Alright, so this leads me to a bit of a confusing part in this story. You see, up until page 30, this was pretty straightforward. You would have one section be in Carla's perspective, and then a whole nother section would be in Rise's perspective. So that's fine. But then you get to page 30, and things start getting messy pretty fast. The very last paragraph, page 30, it's all been in Carla's perspective, and then out of nowhere, this last paragraph, it jumps into Rise's perspective. Rise regarded her while at the same time he restrained himself from getting closer to her or even touching her to see if she was real. So that was a little unsettling. And then it just starts to get worse. As you go on, page after page, these instances, these conversations between Rise and Carla, the perspective shifts from each person. So Carla will say something, and the narration will be in her perspective, but then Rise will respond, and the narration will be in his perspective. So each paragraph, back and forth, just head hopping left and right. And it's very whiplashy, not so good. It's a little frowned upon in the writing community. This then happens later in the story with a different character, a third character, Commander. When Carla is talking with Commander, the perspective hops back and forth between them. Throughout the whole book, we don't ever really get to see what people are thinking word for word, like actual internal dialogue. But then magically on page 190, we randomly get Don't I Know It. The simple 4 words are italicized, and it says, Rise thought to himself. Oh, look at that. There's actually another spot where it says an internal dialogue thought, but it's not italicized. It says, Oh, Rise. This is on page 141. Oh, Rise. If only you were here with me now, Carla thought. That should have been italicized. And again, it's like, now we're doing internal dialogue. What's up with that? Now, let's talk a little bit about I guess, not so much character development, but like group development. The League of Galaxies, their motivations. It's kind of weird. Because basically in the story, the League of Galaxies is saying that what's happening on Earth is bad because of what humans are doing, right? And essentially, them doing bad things is affecting the collective consciousness of all of the universe or something, and that's making other people do bad things. Okay, well, let's just take that for what it is. It That's happening. How do we solve the problem? Blowing up the entire planet? That seems a bit extreme. Um, I mean, if they're so technologically advanced and they've made the decision that the problem is the the Homo sapiens on Earth, then why does the entire planet itself need to be destroyed? Why not just release like a bioweapon or something on the Earth to just commit planetary genocide and kill off humanity? Surely these advanced species can create a bioweapon that they can drop onto the planet, and it specifically targets the human genome, kills us off, and then the whole Earth remains completely intact. The birds keep singing, the waves keep washing, everything's perfectly fine, just no more humans. I guess it all really stems from the fact that there is this elitism mindset from Commander in the League of Galaxies that basically says to evolve is to become more righteous. And if you are evolved, or you know, highly evolved, then you are righteous. That's essentially what this book is saying. The two are the same. Uh, because they're saying that the Homo sapiens on the earth, since they're not evolved enough, then they're wicked and they need to be destroyed. And if that's the case, and we're the most evolved creatures on this planet, then I guess the entire animal kingdom on our planet is also wicked and needs to be destroyed too. Um, so all the koala bears and the kangaroos, the polar bears, every animal on the earth, it's since they're not evolved, they're not advanced, they should be destroyed. It says on page 97 in dialogue, because the only way for any race to advance themselves and reach a higher level of consciousness is to learn from past mistakes and suffer the consequences of their actions. What an interesting take. You see, the commander uses this mindset, this term, race, and he basically he makes it mean a species on a planet. Because, see, Commander is a Homo sapien. Which is weird because doesn't that make him a part of the same race as us? I mean, yeah, he's more evolved than us, but does that make him a different race? Now, wait a minute. Are we really going to go here? Really? So, a race isn't defined by skin color, it's defined by how evolved you are, by how technologically advanced you are. So, because his race has a giant metropolis, clean cities, and apparently this other race, humanity on Earth, doesn't. That makes us a different race. Perhaps we should learn from them. Perhaps we should use that and apply that here on the Earth. We should stop defining race as skin color and simply say, these people have nicer cities than these people over here, so they must be a different race. Hmm. So instead of racial classes, it's like wealth classes, technological classes. Very evolved. But see, when you break down his mindset, it doesn't actually make sense because he says here the only way for any race to advance themselves and reach a higher level of consciousness is to learn from past mistakes and suffer the consequences of their actions. But then over here on 64, he talks about how it's bad that, you know, there's all this war and violence and these poor refugees coming out of the Middle East and Africa. And it says, the problem is that no one seems to know how to stop this, or do they, nor do they seem to want to take responsibility for their fellow man. Well, if it's not their problem, why should they care? For example, you know, if let's say the people of Australia are doing just fine, they're living it up, right? But while they're living it up in their technologically advanced cities and peaceful Western civilization, uh, people in somewhere like, I don't know, Syria or something, um, that race of people with their dirty cities and their polluted, violent culture, the people are just not caring for each other, and there's war everywhere. Um, why should the advanced race of Australians uh, be helping those Syrian people? Because, I mean, as it says on page 97, the only way for any race to advance themselves and reach a higher level of consciousness is to learn from past mistakes and suffer the consequences of their actions. Hmm. Speaking of which, on page 64, I find it interesting that Commander lists all these things, and he claims to be romanticizing life. He's kind of coming off in this way that says life is uh, the bottom line importance. Like no matter what you're doing, if it's taking life or affecting life, it's not good. You always have to respect and focus on life, whether it's human life, animal life, plant life. Life is important. If there are living cells, then you have to, care for it. It's got rights. Okay? But nowhere in this long little rant here, the first top half of page 64, does he mention abortion as being a bad thing. Now you might say, well, he's an advanced alien species coming from a galaxy far, far away. What would he know of abortion? Obviously, that's like that's such an intricate little thing. Like, why would he care about that? Like, he probably doesn't even know about that. Well, I mean, I don't know. He apparently understands human trafficking and sex slavery, and he understands Middle East and Africa as a place, and talks about violence and terrorism, and he seems pretty educated on everything. There's such a weird disconnect. Like going back to the race thing. I mean, on page 162, Commander specifically says, in regards to his home planet, Tira, that they are of one race, and our race is only one. Even though we do have different skin pigments or skin pigmentation. So their skin colors are different, but they're all one race. So on the Earth, we have a term called xenophobe or xenophobia. The idea of xenophobia is you are scared of people who are coming from a different country. You don't like people outside your country, right? Well, Commander, you're a Homo sapien, and the people on Earth are Homo sapiens. So shouldn't you all be part of the same race? One race? Doesn't matter if you got different skin pigmentations. Obviously, you're not racist. But apparently, you draw a distinction between your world and the home world of Earthlings. So I guess you're like a extraphobe, extraterrestrial phobic. People who come from other planets, you don't see yourselves equals. In truth, this concept just doesn't make sense because how can Commander, who is a Homo sapien, argue for the destruction of Earth, where his species comes from? And furthermore, which, by the way, doesn't make sense, it's fucking annoying. Why is the whole council, the Elder Council of the League of Galaxies, why are they all Homo sapiens? Where's that hashtag equality? Where's that equal representation, man? I mean, we're talking about this League of Galaxies of all these species from across intergalactic space, and we've got Homo sapien supremacy going on here, man. They've got this thing on lock. They're just controlling it. Talk about Homo sapien privilege. If you're a Homo sapien, you get to run this thing, man. You get to be on the Elder Council. Anyway, how is it the whole Elder Council and the leader, Commander, are Homo sapien, and yet they have it in their mind that perhaps the Earthlings are just unsavable? There's no way that those people could evolve to our level. Your fucking existence would probably be the greatest example that they can, because you yourself made it work. You are the commander. You are supposedly the most evolved or righteous of your whole civilization, right? So why don't you, as you say on, was it page 64, why don't you take responsibility for your fellow Homo sapiens? Why don't you help out your people on the Earth? Now, there's a really annoying thing in this book. On page 65, let me remind you, our decisions are made for the greater good, Commander stated. So he's justifying blowing up planets for the greater good. So that's his mindset, right? Commander thinks that the concept of the greater good is important. But I thought all life was important. What if, for the greater good of the Earth, we need to leave the Sirians where they are to die? Let those unevolved people, that race of unevolved people, die in their dirty, violent cities. And let us evolved people in our Western civilizations continue to prosper, because we've already learned from the consequences of our actions, and we've evolved to a higher level. Oh no. See, on the Earth, we're supposed to take care of everybody. But apparently, intergalactic speaking, no, don't care for people. That's right. But anyway, he talks about the greater good. Then on page 73, you have the narrator talking about this vision, this dream, and it says expressions of shock marred their faces, but they had to think of the greater good. So that means the narrator believes in the mindset of the greater good. Then in the epilogue at the end of the book on page 227, you have this little segment where it says, Carla agreed. In dialogue, I'm sure the League did this for the greater good. Blah, blah, blah. So she's acknowledging this concept of the greater good. So everybody's in agreement. The greater good is good. But this isn't the only thing that seems to be unanimous across the board. Because you see, everyone seems to have this agreement that love equals good. And thus you could then infer that hate equals bad. And so through the book, it talks about how there's this obsession with love. How we need to spread love. Love is so important. Love has to be everywhere. We've got to show love. We can't allow evil to win. We've got to have love. It actually says it on the back of the book. Issues involving the fight between love and evil. But wait a minute. If love equals good and hate equals evil, and you're saying we need to spread love everywhere and we shouldn't hate, then that sounds kind of like an endorsement for good. In fact, the greater good, right? That seems pretty black and white. There's the good stuff in the universe, and there's the bad stuff in the universe. And we should promote only the good and never the bad, so that the good will triumph over the bad. You see, on page 55, thankfully, we get a nice little bit of telling at the top of the page. It says, Carla was a straightforward kind of person, and Rise knew she favored the black and white of a discussion and disliked the gray areas. Well, I mean, what I just said, that certainly sounds like it's going to ring true. She seems to be very black and white. Good is good, bad is bad. That's pretty much the end of it, right? Wrong. You see, on page 98, you have this little bit. On 98, it says, he even understood, to a certain extent, that growth and development of mind and spirit came from hardship and negative events. The balance of what earthlings called yin and yang applied to the entire universe. You couldn't have one thing without its opposite. It's interesting that you say that, narrator. So the narrator is stating it as if it is an undeniable fact that there is yin and yang, this balance in the universe. It says you couldn't have one thing without its opposite. So the narrator is buying into this yin and yang mindset. And it says he even understood in reference to Rise. So Rise understands this concept of yin and yang, so he believes in it. Then on page 170, Carla says in dialogue, there is a concept on Earth we call yin and yang, which in essence means cause and effect. and then it goes on. And she basically endorses it, right? On page 227, she also says, I'm sure the League did this for the greater good, but as I said in the past, it's a yin and yang thing. You can't have goodness unless you have evil. Goodness is always reinforced wherever evil lurks. Evil, whether we like it or not, unties us in good deeds, unites us in good deeds. We learn patience, tolerance, and even forgiveness from evil, and these qualities make us better beings. This is the true nature of things, both here on earth and in the whole universe. There is no disagreement in this story. Where is the conflict in this story? Where is the clash of ideology in this story? Narrator, Rise, Commander, and Carla. They all agree on the same exact thing. They all think that yin and yang is this great thing. There's got to be balance between good and evil. But wait, they also say that good should triumph over evil. So which is it? Are you embracing the Western mindset that there is good and there is evil and good must triumph over evil? Or are you embracing the Eastern philosophy of yin and yang, that there is good and there is evil, but you shouldn't endorse either one? Neither one should triumph over the other. There should be balance. They both should be protected. They're both equal. I mean, on page 172, Carla flat out says, but it is my deepest belief that good will always overcome evil. Oh, really? Please tell me more. You know, believe it or not, there are people who think slavery is a good idea. There are people who think terrorism is a good idea, or that white nationalism is a good idea, or think going around murdering people is a really good idea, or robbing people, or molesting kids, or throwing little puppies in rivers. Believe it or not, no matter what you think is just morally or logically the right thing to do, or is correct, there's someone out there who disagrees with you on a logical or belief foundation. For some reason, they disagree with you, no matter how certain you are. And that is what makes life interesting. And yet, in this story, everyone is unanimously on the same page. Like, it's not even like two people disagree and then in the end they resolve their differences. Like, there's not even that. Now, something that I thought was really good on page 144 to 145. So, this little section, and then this whole section here. I really liked that. Basically, in this section, you've got Carla, the human. She's on a spaceship for the first time, these aliens, and she's walking from like corridor to corridor through hallways, and she's looking at all this advanced tech, and she's like wanting to take it in. She's obviously very fascinated, very interested, but she has no time to take it in because she's got to frantically follow Commander through the ship so she don't get lost. And when I was reading it, it felt very fast paced. It felt very rushed. And that was good actually, because it made me, as the reader, feel what she was feeling. It put me actually in her shoes because I was being rushed through it. I couldn't stop and appreciate the things around me to look at all the stuff. She's just rushed through, and all she gets is glimpses. and I thought that was cool. One thing that was kind of uh, bothersome was in dialogue. The character commander, obviously they normally talk like telepathically basically, and they can speak in other languages and stuff. But he's supposed to be so old and so wise, I just kind of assumed that he would talk more like proper. And so on page 146, he says two sentences. The first one is good. The second one, not. The first sentence, he says, "Your sense of humor is your salvation." That is very proper, very weird. A normal person wouldn't speak like that. That's good. That's how we should talk. Then the next sentence, "Most earthlings would be freaking out by now." Nah, nah, bruh. You might argue, well, maybe he's just humoring Carla by using her hip human slang, you know. But it's not really. I feel like it should have been just. He should have stuck with one thing, if that's what he's doing. I think he should have just spoke proper the whole time. But then during this trip where Carla's out in space, she gets almost like a ditzy, almost teenager like vocabulary. It's kind of weird, not a place. She hasn't talked like this throughout the story, and just randomly, like on page 152, she says, "We'll only be away like around 10 or 12 hours tops, right?" The word like, um, that's just a filler word. If that was in narration, that shouldn't be there. But since it's dialogue, that's fine. You can roll with it. It adds character to the character, right? Problem is, she hasn't spoken like this throughout the story. This kind of happens again on page 159, where Carla says, "Is there going to be a lot of shaking and stuff?" Carla looked a little uneasy. That just seems so childish. Again, if she talked like that throughout the book, it wouldn't be weird. I mean, it would kind of be weird, but it would be her. But just randomly, these two popping in, it's like, where'd that come from? Another thing is on this trip through space, and it happens like right when this journey starts, and then it ends right when the journey stops. Um, right when Carla leaves with Commander, the writing does something weird, where the were sentences in dialogue from both Carla and Commander continues to start with "anyway, comma, blah blah blah." So just randomly, they'll be in the middle of a conversation. Carla will say something, and then she'll be like, "Anyway, comma, blah 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 blah," and then 3 or 4 paragraphs later, Commander does it too. "Anyway, comma, blah 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 blah," and it only happens during that section. There's like, I don't know, 25, 30 pages. It pops up several times. I don't know why, but it's only in that section of the book. Sadly, the last 3 chapters of the book, what I've been reading throughout the book to get to, I'm just so disconnected from. It's so bleh. Like, I just didn't care. It was boring. Um, Pretty sad that the climax of the story is not the end of the story. Kind of took the middle route instead of the long drag to the climax right towards the end, and then boop. No, didn't do that. And that really has to do with one. Who the hell is Tovo? Tovo, this alien guy. is supposed to be a bad guy. He's supposed to be the antagonist, the villain, or whatever, right? But who the fuck is Tovo? I mean, like, seriously. He pops up in one scene for the first time, trying to kill Rise, and he just gets bitched out by a little dog. The dog kicks his ass, pins him to the ground like a little bitch, and then Rise has the dog release his throat, and then he runs off like a little coward. And we're like, that's the big bad boogeyman? That's what we're building up to go against? I mean, come on, man. And so, in the final showdown, if you want to call it that, when Tovo kind of attacks the dog and then tries to kill Carla, it's like, who the fuck is this guy? Why? He doesn't matter. And then like there's like the weird ass thing where he's trying to like rape Carla. That just seems so petty. This book is not an arcade book, so that's great. Despite it being very leftist in terms of politics and stuff, at least it's not an arcade book. But then you shove that wannabe rape scene, and it just feels so forced. It's so cliche. Oh, the readers don't know who this character is. How can I make them just out of nowhere think that he's bad? I'll make him try to. I'll have him use lots of cuss words out of nowhere, and then have him try to rape the main character. Haha. Ah, yes. They'll never see it coming. The problem is that in the middle of the story, the tension climaxes with Carla giving the speech on another planet in defense of Earth. So, in the middle of the story, she literally saves the entire Earth and all of humanity. So the stakes are so high that if she fails, everything is destroyed. And then that is followed up with an alien who just wants to like rape one woman and then kill her. And just like, I mean, who really cares about this one girl? If she gets raped and killed, it's like, fuck it, it's just one girl. So let's talk about this speech for a second. First of all, let me give some serious props to the author, Sylvia Mazzara. I see you back there smiling at me. Very clever. Very clever. For those who are ruining the book for themselves and have not read the book and are watching this spoiler-filled video, obviously the author has a lot that she wants to say in terms of politics, and damn, is she not clever in her way of shoehorning it into this book. Because the story is building to this moment. There's not a whole lot of build, but when it starts to build, it's like, holy shit, it's really intense. This is exciting. Where'd this plot come from? And she has to go and speak to these aliens to defend the Earth. And the whole plot is centered around this speech that she has to give to these aliens. And straight up, man, when I was reading this book, I felt something. I genuinely felt something in this reading this book that I never felt reading any of the other books that I've read on this channel. The previous 7, nothing. But I actually felt something reading this book. And it was anxiety. Because in those few seconds before she begins to speak, I was on the edge of my seat like, what the fuck's she gonna say? Like, it was such a great nail biter moment. Like, this girl has traveled literally across space to a whole nother planet and galaxy, talking with all these aliens. She would die if it weren't for Commander there to keep her safe, to keep her mind clear or whatever. She's nervous. She has no pre-planned speech. And you're just like, what the fuck would I say if I was in that situation? Like, that's so cool. That's so good. Like, genuinely. And then the author, as she's got the readers right in the palm of her hands, boom, puts in all her political subliminal propaganda. Which, whatever, I don't care. If you believe what you believe, that's fine. That's all good. But I was like, man, that's so clever. But the build up, it was so good. It was so pure. I was genuinely anxious and excited. I was like, I genuinely was like, what's going to happen with this character? How's this going to unfold? And sadly, that should have been your climax. And I guess it was. It was your climax. Your climax just came way too early. Your climax was in the middle of your story. I mean, unless, that's what you're going for. I can't remember the guy's name, but the concept of having the climax in the dead center of the story, there is a type of story format like that. Maybe that's what you're going for. If that's what you're going for, you've absolutely nailed it. But in our kind of modern term of storytelling, we typically like to have the climax around like the 4/5 mark or the 5/6 mark, not the 3/5 mark right in the middle. Because after that, I just didn't care, especially with with the end of the story. I'm not going to call it a climax, just the end of the story. I just didn't care. Which is pretty sad. So let's talk about my predictions, because I had some predictions in this story. So on page 117, I made my first prediction because I read a piece of dialogue from Rise. Rise says, "Don't worry, Commander has a good idea. It's someone from one of the galaxies that recently joined the League." And when I read that, I interpreted it as his ignorance. I thought that was a false lead by the author. And so my prediction was, my guess, Commander ordered the warning shot to save Rise. You see, I thought, wow, that would really set up such a good, in-depth character development for Commander. Commander, this obscured, advanced alien guy, and he loves his son, his adopted son Rise, and he does it so much, and he's got the mindset of the greater good, that in his perspective, for the greater good of himself and Rise, that he would be willing to shoot a type of missile thing down to the earth and do it to scare his son, to try and shake him out of his stupid, blinded love, ignorance, his youthful ignorance. So he could say, look, son, I know that you care for this girl, but I don't want you to throw your life away for her. Come back, son. Be with us, because we're going to blow this planet up, and I don't want you to die with it. And I thought, man, that'd be a good way to kind of build up to in the story, to where there's eventually this showdown, to where Commander turns out to be the bad guy, so to speak. He's not truly villainous, but he is in opposition because he thinks differently, and his motivations have put him in opposition of our main characters, plural. But no, that doesn't happen. My next prediction came on page 136. It says, the look in Commander's eyes was a grave one. Dialogue. Unfortunately, he escaped. But we don't know if he's really after Rise. Perhaps he's simply angry because Earth is getting a lot more consideration on the issue of annihilation. And when I read that, I thought that was again Commander lying, but not because he was the one who fired the missile, maybe. I still kind of up, that could maybe be a thing. But I had this other thing. I said, I now suspect personal revenge. And then I put one word. Zayi? Question mark. Because I thought, holy shit. This is supposed to be like a romance. Relationships and stuff. What if his wife that he thinks is dead isn't? What if the woman that he thinks died in a volcano survived? What if the backstory that we haven't been told yet is that he thought she was going to die in the volcano and he left? He thought, it's a done deal, it's for sure, boo hoo hoo, my wife's gonna die, there's nothing I can do, I gotta get out of here. And he left and abandoned her. And she didn't die. But he just assumed she died in the volcano. That was it. And so he's moved on. He's moved on. He's found this new woman. And poor Zayi has been struggling out in space. She found a way off that planet or whatever. And she's been trying her best to find this man who abandoned her. And she's not sure how to feel about it. She's got these mixed emotions. It really adds some character depth to her. She still obviously kind of loves Rise, but should she be angry at him for abandoning her? She needs to hear his side of the story before she can make her mind up. But one thing's for sure, she needs to find her husband. And when she does, she finds him on Earth, snuggled up with this Earthling who looks just like her. And I was like, holy shit, yo. This is going to be good. So I was like, Carla doesn't know that Zayi looks just like her. So this could definitely set up an awesome moment where she comes to Earth and confronts Carla. And then there's Carla looking at her doppelganger, this evil alien version. And she's like, you stole my man, you bitch. And then they have a fight or whatever. Maybe she kidnaps Carla or something, I was like, man, that'd be awesome, because then Rise would find out, holy shit, my wife is still alive? And then he's put in that awkward situation where he has to look at them both and make a decision. My wife, Zayi, I thought you were dead. The love I have for you, but Carla, you're my soul twin. But I don't know you all that well. I spent so much time with you. Like, that would have been so good. And then he probably picks Carla and maybe Zai dies or something. And then now he's all upset because now he's having to experience it again. Like, oh no, now she really is dead. It's because I shot her. And then Carla's like, it's okay. It's okay. Don't be sad. But by the way, why the fuck did you hook up with me? Did you only like me because I look like your ex-wife? Huh? And he's like, nah, baby, come on, shit. I mean, you look like her, yeah, but you look like me too. We're all just a bunch of lookalikes. Let's go walk on the beach. But, but no, none of that happens. My third prediction uh, was specifically when that tidal wave comes in the story, and it's the one that Carla saw in her vision, in her dream, and as a reader, you're like, oh shit, that's really gonna happen. There's a bit of a nice setup by the author where the author has us see a vision of like fire and death, and then fire and death happens, but somewhere else, and it turns out that that wasn't a vision, like of Carla's own death. That was just picking up the bad vibes in the air or something. So then, when Carla has another bad dream about a tsunami killing her, our guard is down. We're like, oh, that's probably just another bad vibe thing. Don't worry about it. No big deal. But then it actually happens and the tsunami's coming in, and you're like, oh shit, it really is a prophecy. Of course, you completely forget about the fire thing. You think it's all in the past or whatever. But not me. You see, when I saw that the tsunami thing was really a prophecy, I went back to the fire and I thought, well, wait a minute. What if the fire thing was real? What if? What if the prologue is not some stupid, pointless thing at the beginning of the story to kill time and throw us in with pointless action dump about characters that don't matter to us because we haven't learned about them yet? What if that prologue is actually a glimpse of the end of the book? I thought, whoa, wait a minute here. What if this book has a sad ending? What if something happens and in the end of the book, the prophecy vision thing we see, what if it happens and Carla dies at the end of the book? What if she's burned alive? Because that would be so powerful, because then you would have this image of Rise, you know, holding, cradling his burnt, charred love, Carla, and him crying because it's happened basically again. He's watched this woman who looks just like his ex-wife, who burned to death in a volcano or volcanic eruption. Now she's died as well with fire again. And then to make it worse, this would be after Rise had submitted his letter thing to the League of Galaxies, at which point he's no longer allowed to go back to his home world. So he would have given up his life with the League of Galaxies and forever been banished basically from the Tyrians and have to live on Earth. But his love, Carla, would be gone. And he would have lost both his loves and his home world, and now he's just on Earth. He could still speak to Commander, but that's all he'd have. And but the little silver lining is the Earth Earth itself would be like the essence of Carla, because you could have twisted the end to where it's like the only thing I have left now that Carla is dead is the Earth, her home world, this place that seems so strange to me, but it's not that strange. Truthfully, I see its beauty. I see what it is that she loved so much about it. And with her gone, I suspect I'll spend the rest of my life getting to know and love the planet that she gave her life to save. Some shit like that. Like, I was like, yep, yep. That would be a thing. I could totally see this happening. No, that don't happen either. Just some Tovo alien guy shows up and tries to rape Carla. And who the fuck is Tovo, man? Now, my vision for the story, if I was close to this author, Sylvia, and I was like her writing buddy, her beta reader or whatever, and I was giving her feedback on the story, basically this is what I would have suggested. I would have suggested that Tovo be introduced much, much earlier in the story. He should have been introduced very early in the story as an antagonistic force. You could have had the same exact scenario with him trying to kill Rise, but then perhaps a strange dog that he's never seen before attacks the bad man and saves his life. This strange dog being Tom, and maybe that's how he meets Tom. And then after the confrontation and the alien runs away, then here comes wandering this twin of his ex-wife, some strange earthling who he learns later is named Carla. And the dog tells him, that's your owner? Okay. So that'd be how it starts, right? Or maybe, the first couple weeks while they're hanging out, Rise goes out for a walk by himself, and then he's attacked, and then Tom saves his life, whatever. Either way, Tovo has to be introduced early. Then, when the time comes for Carla to go off planet to go and talk to the alien people on Tira, instead of her on this adventure and then flashes of Rise sitting around being bored, he could have then went on his mission to go after Tovo. And so Carla goes up into space to Tira. Meanwhile, Rise calls up the dog sitter, and then he goes off into space with his fleet or whatever, and we could have followed Rise through space and seen kind of the battle going on, and you go back and forth between the two. I think it's such a shame that when that part of the story comes around, we see Rise sneak off, and then we just follow Carla moping around the house. It's just like, what the fuck? And then we find out, like, after the fact and in the epilogue, that there was like this big space battle and shootout, and there's a black hole and Rise almost gets shoved into it, and it's like, holy shit, like there's really exciting things going on and we're not involved. Why the fuck aren't we involved? So you could have had Carly gets on the ship. Next chapter, Rise is following a lead and he thinks he knows where Tovo is. And then he encounters him. Oh no, attack! End of the chapter. Then you go back to Carla. She's learning about the ship. She makes some coffee. They're getting close to the planet. She sees the planet, and now they're about to land on it. Cut the chapter. Back to Rise, the battle's going on. It's really intense. Um, what's ever going to happen? Scene cut. Goes back to Carla. She lands on the planet. She gets to look around, and now she has to go up there and give her speech. She's really nervous, and right before she has to go, Commander's like, "Okay, Carla, this is it. Are you ready?" Chapter cut. Next chapter goes back to um, Rise. He's in this intense battle, the shootout, whatever, and then Tovo. We're seeing him in the battle. He gets the upper hand, and it looks like the end of Rise. He gets shoved into a black hole, and he's like, "Oh no! If we go in there, we're all gonna die." And Tovo's like, "I have beaten you, and now you know." Oh, and then you would introduce the this whole conspiracy plot thing with Tovo working with the Hargons. I can't remember their name. With the members of the the League of Galaxies. Rise finds out in these chapters, and he's like actually working. Like, we've got to stop this, and they're like, "Oh no, but we've lost communications. We can't use communications for whatever fucking reason. So I can't tell Commander. What are we gonna do? We've got to stop Tovo now." But then they almost get pushed into the black hole, and psh, into that. The next section goes over back to Carla, and then the big climax. We get finally the speech towards the end of the book. It's fantastic. She's fatigued. She collapses. They get back on the ship. She's going back to Earth. When they get back to Earth, and she goes into the house. Oh, and like while she's passed out on the ship, someone's like, "Hey, Commander, we've lost contact with Rise. We think he might be dead." And he's like, "Oh no, don't speak of this to Carla. Keep me posted." Well, then they get back to Earth. Still no word. And Carla comes back to the house to find the dog sitter. And she's like, "Oh, Susie," or whatever her name would be. "What the hell are you doing here?" And she's like, "Oh, that's that nice boy with the pretty eyes." Mention the eyes without directly talking about purple blue. "The boy with the pretty eyes, or man with the pretty eyes, he called me up, and here I am. Anyway, bye." She leaves. And then there's Carla, and she's like, "Where's Rise?" And Commander's like, "I need you to sit down. There's something I must tell you." And then he tells her, "Oh yeah, Rise went off into space. He's been fighting, and we think he's dead." And she's like, "Why didn't you tell me this? You're such a bad person." Um, and then he's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty fucked up. Anyway, I gotta go on this. I gotta go back to my galaxy. Bye." And so then he leaves, and then she's all sad about it, right? And then we can have like one little section of her moping around, thinking, "Oh no, I hope he's still alive." And then in the middle of the night, she hears Tom bark, and she gets up, and sure enough, here comes Rise. He's walking back up to the house, and she sees him at night in the dark. She's like, "Rise, oh my gosh." And she runs to him, and she hugs him, and she's like, "I thought you were dead. I'm so glad to see you. I'm fucking crying and stuff." And he's like, "Yeah, baby, it's all good. I had to, save my, uh, my people. And it was this bad guy, and he's already told Commander what's the deal." And then they have this kiss, and it's all romantic, and then boom, she gets her back blown out. Fucking Tovo followed Rise back to Earth, and so there she is, like dying in his arms, and he's like, "Carla, no!" And then he's like, "Rah, ah, 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 ah. You thought you'd kill me or whatever." But then Rise just blasts him and kills him real quick, because we don't need the conflict, right? The big old battle there, we've already seen the space battle, so we don't need it. So he can just poof, get rid of Tovo. Now he's dead. But he served his purpose because of the dramatic sadness of Carla dying. So Rise is all sad, that Carla's dead, and then he's like, I need to reach out to Commander. So he grabs his thumb drive. He's like, Commander, this is the deal. And he's like, oh no, I'll send some people or whatever. Basically, you could do it in a way that you could go into the gray area, if you will, to where you could say, well, Carla couldn't come and live on our planet because she's an Earthling. And we can't use our advanced Tyrian medicine or whatever on her to make her life longer because she's from another planet. Remember, that was a bit of a conversation earlier in the story. But now Carla doesn't exist because she's dead. So she's not loyal to any planet. And then so they could use their advanced technology to revive her and bring her back to life. And maybe they do something to her brain and she can handle it, right? Or something like that. And she wakes up, she comes back to life, and she's in a weird alien place. And she's like, I'm alive. And Rise is like, yeah, so great to see you. And she's like, are we on one of Commander's ships? And he's like, no, you're on Tira. And she's like, what? What am I doing back here? And she's like, wait, why isn't my head hurting? I thought I couldn't be here. And he explains, well, we saved you. And since you were dead, we could bring you here and revive you. Because you weren't an Earthling anymore, you were just dead. And she's like, so what am I doing here? He's like, well, now you're a Tyrian. And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, I thought you couldn't come back here. I thought you were banished or whatever. He's like, I was. But I found out, and this kind of be the unveiling, I found out that Tovo was leading a conspiracy with the Hargonians or whatever, Hargons or something, at the League of Galaxies. And they were going to kill all the council members and make their own league. So you saved your planet, but meanwhile, I was saving my planet and the League of Galaxies. So let's just say they gave me a pardon. They let me come back. And so then they basically could live happily ever after, but on Tira, not on Earth. And maybe Tom got killed by Tovo. And so that's like the sad thing that it just is. It's like, yeah, sadly Tom died. But we can find a new alien pet or something. That's basically what I would have done. But whatever. Okay, now let's talk about some nitty gritty details here. There is a plot hole in this story. It's rather annoying. So, on page 84, it says, Rise thought it was time to indulge her by answering a few of her questions. He had to start somewhere. Dialogue. In Earth years, I'm 33. She replies. And in Tyrian years? He says, 330. Carla looked at him in astonishment. She says, You mean to say you've been alive that long? And there's not a single wrinkle on your face? So one of our Earth years is like 10 years over there? And he nodded in amusement. Yes. She continues, So if you lived to, say, 80 years here on Earth, you'd be like 800 years over there? And he's like, That's right. Our technology is far more advanced than we could, and we can live to a great age. I cannot believe I gotta talk about this. Okay, so he says he's 33 years on Earth, but he'd be 330 years on his home planet Tira. Okay, those numbers should be reversed. They should be reversed. He should have said, well, on my home planet, I'm 33. And then she'd be like, well, how many years is that in Earth years? And he'd be like, 330. That's what should have happened. You got the numbers backwards. You see, if he's just 33 years old on the Earth, then that means if you are 34 years old here on Earth, you're older than Raz by 1 year. Right? If you're 34 and he's 33, then that means you're older than him. However, if you're 34 years old and he is 330, wow, that means that he's been alive since back in the 1700s. But see, the issue is this continues throughout the book. On page 152, we get some more specifics. In dialogue, Carla says, we'll only be away like around 10 or 12 hours tops, right? Let's just stick with 12 because it's a nice rounder number in terms of our clocks. Commander says, in Earth time, yes, but in Tyria time, we'll be away for near on 4 days. Okay. Important lesson for aspiring writers. Sometimes it's best to be vague. Because this author, Sylvia Mazzara, yes, she's got this stuff wrong in terms of just simple math, but she got it wrong because she tried to be specific. If she would have just been vague and said, yeah, we're older, there you go. That would have been it. It's kind of like in fantasy when you have like soft magic versus hard magic. When you do the hard magic, you got to make sure everything checks out because you're going into specifics. This has to be this way, and this is the limitations, and blah blah blah. She's going into these details, and that sets up pitfalls. Alright, so let's do the math. 12 hours on Earth equals 4 days on Tyria, right? So that means, 24 hours on Earth, a day, equals 8 days on Tyria. This means that for every 365 days on Earth, it equals 2,920 on Tyria. We also know that 1 Earth year equals 10 years on Tyria. So now all we have to do is take 2,920 days and divide it by 10, which equals 292. So that means a year on Tyria is equal to 292 days on Tyria. But how long is that in Earth time? A whole year on Tyria is only equal to 36.5 Earth days. We get this by taking 292 and dividing it by 8, because out of 292 days, every 8 of those is a day on Earth. So that means every 36.5 days on Earth, a whole year has passed on Terra. However, that year is not as long as our year. That year is only 36 days, 36.5 days. This is because since 4 days on Terra is the equivalent of 12 hours on Earth, that means the sun rises on Terra every 3 hours. So approximately a day on Terra from sunrise to sunset is about an hour and a half. So basically, let's say the sun rises at 5 o'clock. By 6:30, the sun is setting. So yeah, this is pretty extreme. It means that this planet is spinning pretty damn fast. And also that its revolution around its star is pretty fast too. It's probably the first planet in the solar system that it's in, because you see, it takes 36.5 Earth days for Terra to make a full circle around its star. Our first planet in our solar system, Mercury, it takes 88 Earth days for Mercury to go all the way around our star, our sun. So just a little bit faster. A neat fact about Mercury being so close to the sun, allowing it to go around. On the day side of Mercury, its temperature is 801 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 427 degrees Celsius. I'm reading from the book. I wrote it all down in the book. Yeah, it's pretty hot on Mercury, being so close to the sun. However, Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere, so on the night side, it's negative 279 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 173 degrees Celsius. So it's insanely hot during the day, insanely cold during the night. That's because it doesn't have an atmosphere. What if it did have an atmosphere? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, on page 162, it specifically says, the commander says in dialogue, the climate's temperature and our race is only one. So what he's saying is that the planet, Terra, has one temperature. It doesn't matter if you're on the day, it doesn't matter if you're in the night, it doesn't matter if you're at the equator or if you're at the north or south poles. There's one temperature on the whole planet at all times. This is possible. It's completely within the realm of possibility. In fact, our second planet in our solar system, Venus, has the same exact phenomenon. Venus, the second planet, has one temperature on the whole planet. Day side, night side, equator, at the poles, it's all the same temperature. And that temperature is actually 864 degrees Fahrenheit, or 462 degrees Celsius. All the time, day or night, equator or at the poles. It's hotter than the first planet, Mercury. It's insanely hot. Apparently, it's so hot that it melts lead. And why is that? Why is that exactly? Well, if you're familiar with the climate change movement, then you might know this. Apparently, there's this thing called CO2. Climate change people say it's really, really bad. And Venus, the planet Venus, 96.5% of the whole planet's atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide. So all of the air on Venus is almost entirely carbon dioxide. 96.5%. Almost 100% carbon dioxide. So, if Terra has one temperature on the whole planet, it must be smack full of carbon dioxide. Unless it's got some unknown element that we're not familiar with on Earth. However, during the speech of Carla on page 171, she specifically talks about global warming and how there's a need to cut back carbon emissions. So I'm guessing maybe they knew about that. I don't know. I mean, obviously they don't have like Islam and Muslims and Al Qaeda and ISIS in Africa on Terra, but she talks about that in the speech. So maybe they know about it, but it's not on the planet. I don't know. It's really interesting. It says that they have oxygen and that their air is super clean and super fresh. It's really, really fresh air. It says that multiple times in the book. But it's apparently got a lot of CO2 or something that acts just like CO2. And way, way more than we have on Earth. Because, see, on Earth, our CO2 in our atmosphere is only 0.03%. Just a little bit less than what Venus is rocking over there with their continuous one temperature. Which reminds me of an interesting thing here on page 37. On page 37, it says the temperature on Terra was colder than that of Earth's. So the average temperature on Terra is colder than on Earth. But on page 163, it specifically says that Commander informed her that the temperature outside was a mild 23 Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. So if Terra only has one temperature at all times, then that means the one temperature of Terra is always 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius. The problem is the average temperature on Earth is 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15.5 degrees Celsius. So right there, it's saying that the temperature on Terra is hotter than on Earth. I don't know, man. It's really all out of whack. In addition, it talks about how the air on the planet is so fresh, and there's apparently so much oxygen. Uh, I drew this image of Tira, by the way, using the descriptions in the book, and you gotta ask yourself, where's all that oxygen coming from? The book specifically says the planet was a pink gray planet. It says on page 161 the color of the mass took on a dusky pink and was dotted through some parts with pale gray bodies of what looked like or looked to be giant lakes. It then goes on to say on page 162 when Carla started to make out more of the details below, she saw areas of densely wooded landscape with trees and a diverse plant life. Most of these were located near the giant lakes. And, like on Earth, the plant life was mainly green. So, the plant life only grows around these gray lakes. They then go on to say in dialogue, Tira is larger than Earth, approximately 4 times larger. So we fly to travel from city to city because the cities are around the lakes. They then say on page 163, you can see the cities and plant life are located close to the lakes. In between, there's only desert. And so those deserts are this pink sand. And so it's mostly just a big pink desert with sparse, big green vegetated areas with gray lakes in between. Those lakes, by the way, are also pretty interesting because we don't know what that is. Is it like, I mean, if plant life is growing around it, it's some type of H2O probably, some type of water. You know, on Earth we have brown water and sometimes we have like yellow water, like the Yellow River. So sometimes minerals and elements and things in the ground can change the color of the water. So perhaps that's what it is. It's just changing something in this planet is warped the color of the water and made it kind of gray. Maybe. We don't know if it's fresh water or salt water, but we do have a clue. On page 162, Carla says, it's so different. You don't have oceans, only these lake-type bodies. And the colors are beautiful, although totally alien from anything I've ever seen. And then Commander replies, Tira's a very dry planet with a gigantic landmass, but we have adequate supplies of subterranean water. Period. That's all he says. So he's literally saying the only water that we have to drink is underground. So apparently they can't drink from those lakes. And that also makes me question what their rain is like. It specifically says on page 161 that the sky was the palest of greens mixed with pearl gray. I'm assuming the gray are clouds. That's why in this drawing I did some gray clouds. Also, this is kind of funny and dumb. On page 151, Carla asks, "What's the name of your galaxy?" And Commander just says, It's simply a series of letters and numbers. We don't have romantic names like you used for your galaxy. But then when they get to the planet and they're on Terra, on page 162, he then points at the star and he calls it Gazer. So they named their star with a romantic name like Gazer. Why didn't they give their galaxy a romantic name? Like Swirler or something. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this book. The Stranger by Sylvia Mazzara. What an interesting trip it was. Bye.